When I was a kid, my parents took us to Atlanta one summer for a trip. Um, I was like, what, 8, 9, 10? 9 or 10. Let's go with 9 or 10. Anyway, this was a big deal to go to Atlanta. We didn't get to go on a lot of trips. My parents, they were teachers. They didn't make a whole lot of money. And they could only travel at certain times of the year because, again, teachers. So usually when we went somewhere, with some exceptions, usually it was to see a family member, and that was the case in this case. It was my aunt had moved to Atlanta with the guy she was married to at the time. So we drove. It was a pretty good drive from North Texas to Atlanta. I have a very good impression, by the way, of what it's like to drive through Louisiana. Actually, I'm going to share it with you right now. Are you ready? So this is my impression of driving through Louisiana. Here we go. So I remember a few things about the trip. One was that we went to the Coke plant, or the Coke museum slash plant. I guess they were the same thing. My mom, when we were kids, for some reason, it was just a thing she collected. She collected Coke stuff. It was just all over the house, Coke memorabilia. Don't know why. We didn't drink a lot of Coke. Actually, we didn't drink Coke at all. We were from Texas and we drank Dr. Pepper. But that was still fun. It was interesting because that was where Coke came from. We also toured the Kraft plant. Kraft, like the Kraft cheese company, because that was actually where my uncle at the time, my aunt's husband, they're not together anymore, but that's where he worked at the time. And true story, at this particular plant, this is where they make something like 75% of all the barbecue sauce that's sold in the United States. I don't know if that's just from the Kraft company or in total. They made it sound like it was in total. But yeah, that was where they made all the barbecue sauce, literally all the barbecue sauce. And I got to tour this place, and it was kind of interesting, as a kid, to see all the big vats and how they did it and everything. But true story, something about being like in that smell of barbecue sauce all day made it so that I couldn't eat barbecue sauce, like for years. I mean, literally 3, maybe even 5 years, I could not eat barbecue sauce. Just smelling it, I don't know. It was weird. Like and by the way, living in Texas and not being able to eat barbecue, difficult, not fun. And then eventually, thankfully, I got over it. And now I can eat it just fine. But specifically, I remember they make, I don't know if it was just for the barbecue sauce or if they sold it separately, but they made vinegar there. And they explained that vinegar is like this process that is created by microbes. And of course, they describe these microbes as bugs. So it's like bug juice, basically. And me being 9 made a bit of an impression. So I think that was a big part of it. I equated barbecue sauce and vinegar with literally like eating bug piss. But anyway, along with those things, another place that we visited was Stone Mountain State Park. If you don't know anything about Stone Mountain, which is a hilarious name, it always has been a hilarious name to me. It's Stone Mountain, like what else is it going to be made of? But it's a giant mountain dome that just kind of like comes up out of nowhere. I guess I could go and do a deep dive on the geology to figure out how this kind of thing happens. But, Georgia, hilly, not necessarily mountainous, kind of at the bottom of the Appalachians, not really known as a mountainous area. But then there's just this giant exposed granite rock that just comes out of the ground. So geologically, it's interesting, I guess. But that is not what Stone Mountain is known for. If you know what it's known for, you're probably cringing already. But it's a Confederate monument. On the side of Stone Mountain, I'll put a picture up here. There's a relief. I call it a bas relief, I guess. I'm not an art person, but it's the world's largest bas relief. I did see that of Robert E. Lee, Stonewall Jackson, and Jefferson Davis, 3 leading members of the Confederacy. So it is a Confederate monument. It is as we're talking about Confederate monuments coming down, it is by far the largest Confederate monument in the world. I saw a picture somewhere where like it's so large that some of the people that were carving it could like get into the horse's mouth on the carving to get out of the rain. I saw a picture somewhere of a group of people sitting on the back of one of the horses, like above its haunches or whatever, on a table. Like they had dinner. They had set a table up there and were eating dinner on the top of this horse. And this mountain goes up. I don't know what the numbers are. I could look it up. Doesn't matter. It's a huge mountain. It goes way up. And on the side of it, bam, this Confederate monument. So being 9 or 10 and being back in the late 80s, things were different back then. And I didn't really have like an emotional connection to it in terms of like the whole Confederate symbolism and imagery and whatnot, because I've said this before. Growing up in Texas, we were part of the Confederacy, but we didn't really, that wasn't really like a part of our identity when I was growing up. Texas is Texas, it is its own thing, and we definitely have our own pride, hyper Texan pride that shows up everywhere here in Texas. So I didn't identify with the Confederate imagery, and I didn't get all like South will rise again or anything being there, but I just thought it was a really, it was obviously an achievement, and it was a neat thing. And they had a laser light show. So of course, 9-year-old me is just like lasers, right? But the whole thing was, the laser light show was set to Dixie. I think the Elvis version of it, and all of this is stuff that I hadn't really thought about in a very, very long time. It was just a thing that I visited when I was a kid. And, I guess I started thinking about it lately when all these protests started happening and taking down Confederate monuments and the debate around that. And I started thinking about it, and I brought it up to a buddy of mine who lives in Atlanta. And I found out something about it that really, I don't know, it just kind of changed my thinking on it. Yeah, what he told me was that, and I didn't know this, They didn't really advertise this when you go to Stone Mountain Park, but Stone Mountain, and the reason why they put a Confederate monument on the side of it, not just because it was a big rock that got a lot of attention, the reason they picked that as a place to put a Confederate monument was because it's considered the birthplace of the Ku Klux Klan. So there's actually two different, I guess, versions of the Klan. One that came up during Reconstruction, and then it happened again in the early 1900s, like 1910 or something like that. And this is the second iteration of it that came out. They literally relaunched the Klan in a big rally and cross burning on top of Stone Mountain. And it was after that they decided, hey, let's put a big Confederate monument here, because they were putting Confederate monuments up all over the South at this point. So they decided to do that with Stone Mountain. And yeah. So before I get into any opinion here, just a couple of things that I found just kind of screwing around on Wikipedia looking at this. So first of all, it was not just like set up there because it was related to the Klan. The Klan actually raised money to create it. Like a lot of the money that came to build this came from Klan money. But the person who really pursued this whole thing was a woman by the name of C. Helen Plain, who was a charter member of the United Daughters of the Confederacy. And the person who carved it, or designed it anyway, I don't think he was the one that actually carved it, but he designed it, was a guy named, where did it go? Yeah, it was a sculptor named Gutzon Borglum. I think I'm saying that right. This guy also, by the way, did Mount Rushmore. So he's just the guy you go to when you want to turn a mountain into a monument. But according to Wikipedia, which is where all the finest informations are held, she picked this guy, and apparently he had some Klan involvement, but still she, quote, would not shake his hand. He was, after all, a Yankee. So the person who started the whole Stone Mountain thing was such a Southern pride person that she literally wouldn't shake the sculptor's hand because he was from the North, even though he was still associated with the Klan. Wasn't good enough. He wasn't from the South, so she wouldn't shake his hand. That's how this whole thing came about. Let's just lay the foundations there. By the way, I say, I have this whole living in Texas not really related to the South and everything. I do weirdly have this sort of kinship of sorts, I guess, with Stonewall Jackson, because I was told growing up, and I don't know if this is true. There's a lot of things that I was told when I was growing up that I've now learned are not true. I was told I was Irish, like a quarter Irish, and then my mom did the genealogy, and no, no Irish whatsoever, some English, but even that goes back like pre-Civil War. I'm just the straight up American mutt. But anyway, I was told growing up that somebody had done our genealogy and I was related in some weird way to Stonewall Jackson. So growing up, I always had this, anytime I saw Stonewall Jackson anywhere, I was like, yeah, that's my guy. I came from that guy. Again, I was young. Now, and actually, as I'm sitting down to record this, I just did a little search on YouTube. I was going to try to find images of the laser light show because I didn't remember much about it, but I went out and found one. And I actually, there was a news story that came out just yesterday about some protests that were going on there, which of course there were. Of course there were. We're looking at Confederate monuments now. That's the biggest one. So of course there are protests going on there. But growing up, I didn't think that much of it. Just like I didn't think that much of most of these issues that are now coming about because I was so insulated from them in so many different ways. And now that I'm like looking at it, there's just so much that kind of spills out. Finding out that was founded and funded by Klan members and that it was at the birthplace of the Klan and everything. To me, it's kind of symbolic of a lot of what we're looking at right now, in that it just kind of shows how embedded that unfortunate past that we all share as Americans is into things. You know, we're seeing, they're talking about like changing the name of Aunt Jemima. The one that stands out recently is apparently realtors aren't calling the master bedroom is now the large bedroom. You're not going to say master bedroom because there's slavery connotations there and stuff. And while I 100% agree with the people who are like sharing the memes that are like, police brutality is the issue. That's the real issue, is police brutality. That's what we're trying to do something about. Police reform the police, defund the police, reassign that money into more community programs and stuff. That's the debate. That's the argument that we're having here. And there's all these people that are like, well, how about we change the name of Aunt Jemima? It's like, I mean, yeah, sure, but that's, maybe do something about the police. Okay, well, we'll stop using the word master bedroom. How about that? Okay, but the police. And that frustrates me because it seems like such a big distraction. And in fact, it seems almost counterintuitive. It's like, look, I think of people like my dad, in a small town, white dude, very insulated from all this stuff. Reforming the police in the big cities, that doesn't affect him at all. You could do that and he wouldn't even know that anything happened. But changing the name of syrups and changing the name of how you say the large room of the house. I mean, like changing things like that, those do impact somebody like that. And this might come as a surprise, but old people in small towns, they don't really care for change too much. And sometimes I feel like it's not just a distraction. It's actually, again, counterproductive because it's forcing people to make these like performative changes that don't make any difference whatsoever to the actual problems, and just kind of making them get agitated over it for nothing. Having said that, I also feel like, you know me, I'm always of two minds on everything. Like I do feel like that, but also I kind of feel like having these discussions and bringing to light how, again, embedded all of this racist history is into our current day, it just kind of like brings more light to the fact that this is like a big part of our culture that's always been there, and it's never really gone away, and there's still a lot of work to do. Now, I don't think that the work to do means changing the name of syrup bottles necessarily, but it's that awareness, I guess, that is as a possible positive there. I'm working through it. So I won't go into a long diatribe about the Confederate flag. I've already done that on the main channel years ago, back when I talked about all kinds of different things on the main channel, so I'll just direct you to that. But the thing that's kind of been on my mind lately, the people who are just like so dyed-in-the-wool, like gonna hang on to these Confederate symbols and stuff. The South isn't just the Confederacy. The Confederacy only lasted for 4 years. It literally only lasted for 4 years. I've seen memes that were talking about like Nirvana was together longer than the Confederacy was. But the history of the South, it goes back hundreds of years, and there's millions of different icons and symbols that you could choose from if you want to have pride in this place that you come from. Look, again, I'm from Texas. I get pride of place, okay? But instead of picking literally anything else, you're going to pick the battle flag from that 4-year period representing the time when that part of the country tried to split from the other part of the country in order to preserve their institution of owning human beings. It's literally the greatest scar in the history of our nation, and that's what you're going to celebrate? I am so glad I fixed my hair before I did this. And I don't know, on one hand I get it, because again, I have to filter it through my Texas lens. You know, we had one of the most famous icons in Texas is the Alamo, which was a gigantic loss. You know, like everybody got slaughtered at the Battle of the Alamo, and yet it's like this revered icon in Texas. Now, you know, Texas seceded from Mexico, so we did a similar thing, although, you know, we won our war.
Woo! Yeah, baby!
I don't know where that came from. Just upset the dog. One of my favorite memories actually was my best friend got married, and she lives in San Antonio, so we had the whole rehearsal dinner the night before, and this friend of ours, I believe he was from Philadelphia. I think he was from Philadelphia. He went to college with us, but anyway, we're in San Antonio, and if you've never seen the Alamo, it's literally just there. It's just like in downtown San Antonio. It's surrounded by tall buildings. It's just there, and we're walking back from wherever it was that we had this rehearsal dinner, and we walked past the Alamo, and this friend of ours, his name was Rick. He just stopped. Like, we're all just walking along, and I realized that he wasn't with us, and I looked back, and he was just standing there, just like. And he went, is that Ed? Like, he thought it was fake. He thought it was just like a monument or something. He was like, is that really, is that the Alamo? Is that it? And I was like, yeah, I mean, what's left of it, yeah, you know, because it was actually a lot bigger than the little bit that's left. And I remember he literally, everybody else was just walking, like just walking down the street. And I stayed with him. He literally walked up to the building and was just like touching it. It was like a sacred place. And he's not even from Texas, but that's how much like that's been mythologized, you know? So, I mean, on one hand, I get pride of place. I get that sort of last stand mentality, or was it the lost cause mentality that Southerners have? You know, it was them standing up against what they thought was oppression and just standing up for themselves and their community and everything. But you can't separate the fact that what they were standing up for was enslaving human beings, just the worst thing in the world. And so that we're still reckoning with that, obviously. That's still something that we're having to come to grips with. I'm still sitting here thinking about the time when I was 9 years old, you know, feeling really proud and looking up at these Confederate generals, one of which I felt like I was related to in some way on a laser light show, and listening to Elvis sing Dixie. I felt a swell of pride as a 9-year-old, not knowing any better. I'm not even gonna lie. I might still feel it today. I don't know. It's very manipulative, but it's something we're wrestling with, and it's not fun. It's not fun thinking that I like felt so positive about that experience when I was a kid. But it's a reckoning that we're still working through. We like to think that it was a really, really, really long time ago. It wasn't. It wasn't. And it's gonna take a long time to get past. But everything that's happening right now is part of it, and it's difficult, but it's a good thing. So growth is hard, and we're still doing a lot of it, and there's still a long way to go. And I think I've exhausted that rant. So that's it for now. Anyway, I'm sure that angered some people, but I'm curious to hear what you guys think about all that down in the comments. So have at it. Have a great week, you guys. Love you. Take care of yourselves. See you later.